My name is Maren Holloway, and I found out I owed over $400,000 because my own family used my name behind my back. I stayed quiet my whole life, thinking that made me good. But the day I saw that court summons, something broke. I realized love doesn't ask you to disappear, and I finally said no. If you've ever been the one holding everything together, this story might feel painfully familiar. Stay with me until the end, then tell me, did I do the right thing walking away? Or would you have chosen differently? I'd love to hear your thoughts and your advice. It was the kind of morning that doesn't warn you. The sky was gray but soft, like old flannel. Not stormy, not bright, just there. I'd woken up the same way I usually did. Poured my coffee, turned on the little lamp over the kitchen sink, sat at the table, and opened the stack of mail I'd been ignoring for a few days. The envelope didn't look like much. No return address. Just my name, printed in bold block letters, centered like someone wanted to make sure I couldn't miss it. I almost tossed it. I figured it was junk, maybe a scam, maybe another credit card pitch dressed up like a threat. But something about the weight of it made me pause. Heavier than usual. Real paper, not the cheap stuff. I tore it open while the coffee cooled in front of me. The words hit me in slow motion. Final notice. Commercial debt collection. Balance due, $401,763.18. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. A wrong name, maybe a different Maren Holloway. But the next page had my social security number, my address, my signature, my signature. I sat very still. I looked around the kitchen like something would explain it, like maybe a camera crew would jump out and say it was a prank. But all I saw were my plain white cabinets, the same thrift store curtains I'd had for years, and the quiet hum of a fridge that probably needed replacing. I checked my accounts online. Everything looked the same. No sudden withdrawals, no big red flags. But when I logged into my credit report, the truth sank its claws in. It was real. The loans were tied to a business, Holloway Family Landscaping. My brother Dylan's company. The one he said would take off if he just had the right tools and the right break. I remembered the form he'd slid across the table at Mom and Dad's house 4 years ago. Just a co-signer form, he'd said. A small business loan to get started. Just in case, Mom had added. We're all backing him. I was the only one who signed anything. My stomach clenched, but my hands kept moving, digging through old email folders, bank statements, PDF scans I'd filed and forgotten. And that's when it hit me. My signature, the one from that original loan, had been reused. Copied. Pasted onto larger documents. Agreements I'd never seen. I called my mom that night. She picked up on the third ring, her voice cheerful like she was expecting me to talk about a casserole recipe or something. Hi, sweetie, she said. Everything okay? There's a debt notice in my name, I said. Over $400,000. Linked to Dylan's company. She paused just a second too long. Oh, that, she said lightly. I'm sure it's just something Dylan's working on. Don't stress yourself. He's under a lot of pressure. Her voice, always so polished, felt suddenly sharp, dismissive. Like the words didn't matter because I'd figured out. Because I always did. Mom, I said. My name is on it. My credit is already impacted. Well, you did sign the first form, didn't you? I couldn't answer right away. My jaw had locked tight, like my own body didn't want me to say what I was feeling. I looked at the paper again. My name, bold and clear. Legal responsibility. Debt I didn't ask for. You said you'd take care of it, I managed. Sweetheart, we thought it'd be fine. Nobody planned for it to go this way. I didn't cry when we hung up. I didn't yell. I just sat back in the same wooden chair I'd had since college and stared at the email on my screen, then at the old documents with my forged signature. It wasn't sloppy. It had been careful. Thought through. I wasn't just a co-signer. I was the plan. And suddenly I remembered something Dylan had said to me a long time ago, after one of his breakups. You're the safety net, he said. You always catch the fall. I used to think that was a compliment. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, my coffee cold and untouched, my phone silent on the table. Every so often, I'd look at the letter again, like maybe the numbers would change, or maybe I'd realize it wasn't mine after all. But it was. And somehow, deep down, I knew Dylan wasn't the only one who had let this happen. And I wasn't going to be the one to fix it this time. I drove to Dylan's place 2 days later, though I'm not sure why I even gave him that time. Maybe I still wanted to believe there was a version of this where it wasn't as bad as it looked. Just some messy bookkeeping, a dumb mistake he'd made without thinking. His house sat on the edge of town, out where the streetlights start to thin, and half the driveways are filled with old trucks and rusted tools. His landscaping truck sat crooked in the gravel, one of the back tires almost flat. The porch light was still on, even though it was noon. He opened the door barefoot, wearing the same flannel shirt I'd seen in his social media pictures for the past year. "Maren," he said, like he was surprised I'd shown up. Like the 400 grand hanging over my head wasn't reason enough. "We need to talk," I said. He stepped aside. The place smelled like takeout and whatever air freshener he overused. A game show buzzed low from the TV. I didn't sit. So, I started, holding out a printout of the debt notice. "Want to tell me what this is?" He scratched the back of his neck and looked off to the side like he was counting ceiling tiles. "It wasn't supposed to go that far." "That's your answer?" "No, I mean, look. The business was fine for a while. We had contracts, equipment. I had guys working under me, real ones, not just buddies. But then one job fell through, then another. We got behind. The payments snowballed." "Dylan," I said, steadying my voice, "my name is on 5 separate agreements. Not 1, 5. He looked at me then, almost like he pitied me. "You said you'd help me. That first time, you signed because you believed in me. I signed a small loan. You took that and built a mountain under it. You used my name like it belonged to you." He flinched. "Just barely." I thought I'd get ahead of it before it caught up. Mom and Dad knew. They helped fill some of the paperwork. I figured, worst case, they'd cover a chunk until I sorted it. "You figured I'd bail you out." He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I left without another word. The silence between us said more than yelling ever could. That night, I called my parents. Mom answered on speaker, which I didn't realize until I heard Dad's voice too, faint and scratchy in the background. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," she said, before I could finish the sentence. "Bigger?" I repeated. "It's family," Dad added. "We didn't plan for it to go bad. We just thought it made sense. You've always been the responsible one. And that's why you used me." Mom sighed. "Don't make this about betrayal. You always took care of us. Why is this any different?" I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I stayed late at the office that week, not because there was too much to do, but because the silence in my apartment had started to feel like a weight pressing on my chest. At least here, in the soft buzz of copy machines and half-lit halls, I could pretend I had some kind of control. I was digging through copies of the loan files Dylan had emailed, what he called the originals, when Dana's voice broke through the quiet. "You want a coffee?" I looked up. She leaned in the doorway, coat still on, mug in one hand, eyes tired but kind. Dana Whitmore, managing partner. Most people tiptoed around her, but I never had to. She had that way about her. Sharp but never cold. "I've got a fresh pot in my office," she said. "Come sit." I followed her, not sure if I was walking toward coffee or something I hadn't admitted I needed. We sat in her office, where her desk was cluttered but intentional. Family photos, sticky notes, a jar of hard candies like someone's grandma might keep. She didn't ask questions right away. Just poured 2 mugs and handed me one. "You've been pulling late hours," she said. I nodded. "It's personal stuff. I'm handling it." She gave a small shrug. "I don't need details. But I'll say this, you know where I stand on boundaries, Maren. Blood doesn't make anyone entitled to wreck you." That sentence hit harder than I expected. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling the warmth of the mug seep into my palms while something cold settled deeper inside me. Back at my desk, I opened the files again. I zoomed in on one of the scanned forms, the big one from last year, when the loan jumped into 6 figures. Near the bottom, Above a typed line that read Operations Officer was a signature. Charles Holloway. My father. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling tiles like maybe they'd shift and let some air in. It wasn't just Dylan. It wasn't just some bad choices. They'd done this together. And they'd all assumed I wouldn't fight it. The email came in just after lunch. I was at my desk, trying to review a client file when the subject line caught my eye. Wage garnishment notice, pending. At first, I thought it was spam. But it wasn't. It was from one of the lenders. They were moving forward unless I made arrangements within the next 10 business days. I clicked through the document 3 times, not because I didn't believe it, but because it still felt surreal. Like I was reading about someone else's disaster. I stared at the screen for a long time. I don't even remember what I was thinking. Just this hollow, sort of buzzing in my chest. Then I stood up, walked to the break room, poured myself a cup of water I didn't want, and sat on the window ledge like I was waiting for the world to reset. But nothing did. That night, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was soft, too soft, like the quiet you use when someone's already upset and you're trying not to poke the bear. Sweetheart, your father and I were thinking, what if you took out a personal loan to cover the bulk of it? Then you can pay it off over time, maybe renegotiate the terms. Take out a loan, I repeated deadpan. Just to clean it up, she said. So it doesn't affect your job or your credit long term. It's just a tool, honey. It's family teamwork. Family teamwork. I didn't answer. Just stared at the wall where the paint had chipped above the stove and tried not to scream. You're always so good at handling these things, she went on. We've always admired that about you. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. But then again, maybe it was time to start regretting the right things. Later that night, I got a voicemail from Dylan. His voice was low, like he was half whispering from the driver's seat of his truck. Come on, March. You've always had your act together. Just help me out this once. I swear I'll fix it. I listened to it 3 times. I didn't delete it. I didn't reply either. I lay on the couch with my legs pulled up, the voicemail still echoing in my head. And suddenly, I was 9 again, watching Dylan charm his way out of chores while I stayed behind cleaning up after dinner. I was 12 when he broke Mom's favorite lamp and she looked me dead in the eyes and asked why I didn't stop him. I was 16 when he flunked out of community college and they said, at least we still have Maren. My mother used to call me her little steady ship. You're our anchor, she'd say. You keep us grounded. Back then, it felt like love. Now, it just felt like weight. The next day, I got a call from my landlord. Miss Holloway, I wanted to flag something before it becomes a problem, she said. Your name came up in a tenant report, something with a financial flag. It hasn't affected your lease yet, but I thought you'd want to know. I thanked her and hung up, then just stood in the middle of my living room, arms crossed, staring out the window like I was looking for a sign. This apartment had been mine for almost 7 years. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. Quiet. I'd picked every piece of furniture, every picture on the wall. Not because they were trendy, but because they made me feel like myself. And now I might lose it because someone else gambled with my name. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my phone. I just sat there and let the silence settle in. And somewhere in the quiet, it hit me. This wasn't just about the money, or the loans, or even the risk of losing my home. It was about the role I'd been taught to play since I could speak. The steady ship, the safety net, the responsible one. Every praise I'd ever received had come with a leash. Be the good girl. Don't rock the boat. Smile when it hurts. Make room for everyone else. I looked at the reflection in the glass, my own face, tired but sharp. What if I didn't want to be the steady ship anymore? What if I was never supposed to be? I sipped my tea and let that question hang in the air, heavier than the debt, louder than my family's excuses. And for the first time in my life, I let myself consider the possibility that I wasn't the one breaking this family apart. Maybe I was just the only one who'd ever tried to hold it together. I hadn't been to my parents' house in a while, and I didn't miss the way my stomach tightened as I pulled into their driveway. The old oak tree in the front yard still had the same rope swing Dylan used to launch himself from. My father's truck sat in the same spot it always did, parked a few inches over the line, like he was daring someone to say something. I wasn't there for a fight. I told myself that 3 times as I walked up the steps. Mom answered the door like I'd shown up for Sunday dinner. "Maren," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You should have called first." "I just need the family binder," I said. "The one with the tax and insurance records. I think it's in the back hall closet." She didn't ask why. Just moved aside and let me in. The house smelled the same, like wood polish and aging carpet. I walked past the photos in the hallway, the ones where Dylan's smile stretched bigger than mine in every frame. Dad was in his recliner, watching something on mute. "You digging up paperwork?" he asked without looking up. "Yep." He turned the volume down further, like that counted as engaging. "Might as well give you this, too." He reached into the side table drawer and pulled out a small silver key. Held it out like it weighed nothing. "The box at the bank?" I asked. He nodded. "You might as well know everything." I didn't ask what was in it. I just took the key. The safety deposit box was in the downtown branch of Summit Federal. A beige brick building with an oversized flag out front and the smell of lemon cleaner hanging in the air. The banker recognized my last name and didn't ask many questions. Inside the box, I found 3 thick folders, a USB drive, and a few loose papers in an envelope marked private. I didn't even wait to get home. I sat in my car in the parking lot, engine off, cold air seeping through the window cracks, and started flipping through the documents. Loan agreements. Some I'd already seen. Others were new. My name printed cleanly across pages I'd never signed. Property agreements listing me as co-owner on things I didn't even know existed. And then there was the letter. Typed. No greeting. No signature. Just a paragraph on thick cream paper. "If she ever finds out, we'll say we did it for her future. She won't walk away. She never does." My fingers shook as I read it again. It wasn't just carelessness. It wasn't even desperation. It was planned. They knew what they were doing. They assumed I'd fold. They counted on it. I sat there for a long time, the envelope in my lap, my breath fogging the windshield. The anger didn't come right away. That was the strange part. It was grief that hit first. The kind that makes you feel like something's been dying a long time and you just didn't want to admit it. I drove home in silence, the folders buckled into the passenger seat like they needed extra protection. When I got inside, I turned off my phone. Left the lights off. Sat in the dark with a glass of water I didn't drink and listened to the ticking of the kitchen clock. I stopped replying to texts. Ignored 3 voicemails from Dylan, 2 from Mom. I didn't even listen to them. I knew what they'd say, some version of "this got out of hand," or "we never meant to hurt you." But they did. A week later, Dana asked if I wanted to grab coffee. We met at Cedar Ridge Cafe, the one with mismatched mugs and paper menus folded like church bulletins. I got there early, picked a seat by the window, even though the sun was too bright for my mood. Dana slid into the chair across from me, took off her gloves, and gave me a look that said she wasn't here as my boss today. "You look tired," she said. "I feel tired." We sat in silence for a bit, sipping from chipped mugs that somehow made the coffee taste better. "I have a son," she said finally. "He's 32. We haven't spoken in 4 years. Only time he reached out was to ask for money. When I said no, he disappeared again." I looked at her, surprised. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes either. "The hardest part isn't letting them fall," she said. "It's realizing they were never holding you to begin with." Something cracked in me then. Not loud, just a tiny split, like a seam in old fabric coming undone. I didn't cry, but I held on to that sentence all the way home. The walk from the cafe felt colder than usual. Wind pushing against my coat, like it was trying to get inside. And for once, I didn't try to stop anything. Not the silence. Not the distance. I just let it come. The envelope from the county courthouse was thick, official, and cold in my hands. I didn't open it right away. I stood in the lobby of my apartment building for what must have been 5 full minutes, staring at the typewritten label like it was addressed to someone else, someone who deserved this. My name looked strange in that font. Too sharp. Like it had been stamped, not written. Like it had already been processed, weighed, and judged. By the time I climbed the stairs and made it into my kitchen, my palms were damp. I laid the envelope flat on the table like it was fragile, even though it had already broken something inside me before I touched it. I peeled it open carefully.
Slowly. I don't know why.
Like being gentle with the truth would make it less true. The words felt surgical. Precise.
Cold.
Summons to appear in court. Commercial loan default. Balance due, $432,876.49 plus fees. I blinked, then blinked again. My vision swam. There it was in black and white. My name. My liability. No Dylan. No Charles. No Lenora.
Just me.
I flipped through every page, every line, every clause, hoping for even the smallest sign that someone else had been listed, anyone. But there was nothing. No trace of them. They'd made sure of that. They'd stayed clear while letting me sink.
I didn't eat that day. Couldn't.
I paced around my apartment like it was foreign territory, my hand dragging along the countertop, brushing the back of the dining chair, pressing briefly against the cold glass of the window. Like I was checking to see if the walls were still real. If I was still real. I ran my fingertips along the receipts taped to the fridge. Stared at the yellowed grocery list I hadn't updated in weeks. Everything felt untethered.
Off.
Like I'd woken up inside someone else's life. I didn't cry. But that night, I sat on the kitchen floor, back pressed against the cabinets, knees tucked in, forehead resting on them. The tile was cold through my sweatpants. My arms were wrapped tight around my legs, the way I used to curl up during storms when I was little. I whispered it like a confession. They really left me here, alone. And the worst part? They knew they had. And they counted on me taking it. The next morning, Dana called. Her voice was like flannel, soft, warm, familiar. Not pitying, just steady. Come to the house tonight, she said. I made chili. You've probably had enough frozen pizza to last a lifetime. I almost declined out of habit, but there was something in her tone. She wasn't inviting me because I needed help. She was inviting me because she knew I didn't want to admit that I did. Her house surprised me. It wasn't polished or curated like mine. It was full of life. Books on the coffee table, family pictures framed in mismatched sizes, half-read magazines stacked beside the fireplace. The kind of clutter that meant someone actually lived there. A place that had nothing to prove. She handed me a bowl and slid a blanket toward me on the couch. We ate in silence at first, the kind of silence that didn't ask to be filled. After a while, she set her spoon down. I made a call, she said. Old friend, retired now, but sharp as ever. She specializes in financial coercion cases. I shared the broad strokes. She thinks you have a case. I blinked. A case? There's precedent, Dana said, folding her hands in her lap. This isn't just a family misunderstanding. They used your trust. They manipulated you into signing, then took advantage of your silence. That's not just hurtful. It's actionable. I stared into my bowl. The chili had gone lukewarm, but I kept eating. You think I could actually win? Dana leaned back, her expression softer than I'd seen it. I think you've spent your whole life believing that standing up for yourself makes you the problem. That saying no means you don't care. But that's not love, Maren. That's conditioning. And it's not consent. I didn't respond right away. But something in me shifted, like a latch lifting, slow and creaky, after years of being stuck shut. Not broken. Just finally open. The next day, Mom left me a voicemail. Her tone was light, practiced. We've been thinking about how to resolve this with as little trouble as possible. If you take out part of your retirement, we can avoid court and keep the family out of the spotlight. You know how rumors start in a small town.
I didn't call back.
Instead, I spent the afternoon drafting a letter to the lender's attorney. With Dana's help, I prepared a formal response to contest the liability and request a case review. It was the first legal document I'd signed in months. My hand didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. And for the first time in my life, I was writing something that didn't say, "I'll fix it," or "whatever you need."
It said, "No, just that." And it was enough.
I told them I'd come by at 6. Part of me didn't want to give them that courtesy. I wanted to just show up, unannounced, and let everything spill out like a knocked-over glass. But I knew better. They would have taken my silence and twisted it into avoidance. Turned my showing up on their terms into proof I was still playing along. If I didn't name the time, they'd claim the narrative. The driveway looked the same. Gravel patchy and uneven. My dad's old truck still leaning slightly to one side like it had a bad hip. The porch swing moved just a little with the wind, creaking like it always did, steady as a metronome. The plastic flowers by the door were new, but only in the sense that they were different shades of fake. The smell of the house hit me as soon as I stepped in. Pine cleaner, laundry starch, and something faintly sweet, like overripe bananas left too long in the bowl. Time had stood still here. Same beige walls. Same photo of Dylan in his high school baseball uniform, framed and centered on the hallway shelf like a shrine. My own graduation picture sat in the corner, tucked behind a dusty snow globe. They were already in the dining room when I walked in. My dad stood near the window, hands stuffed in his jeans pockets, like a boy waiting to be scolded. My mom sat at the head of the table, her back a little more hunched than I remembered. She was clutching a tissue, not used, not even crumpled, like it was waiting for the tears she knew were expected. Dylan leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, one ankle hooked behind the other. He looked bored. "Thanks for coming," Mom said gently, as if this were some strange family brunch and not the aftermath of betrayal. I nodded but stayed standing. There was a long, loaded pause. Then Dad cleared his throat like someone starting a speech he didn't want to give. "Look," he began, eyes on the window frame, not on me. "We didn't mean for it to go this far. We thought we could fix it before it got to you." "You mean before I found out?" I said. He shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't want to hurt you," he added. "We just thought we could make it work." "No," I said quietly. "You thought I wouldn't push back. You thought I'd take the hit. Again." Mom's voice cracked as she tried to jump in. "That's not fair, sweetheart. Everything we did, every choice, it was out of love. We love you." I let her words hang there, suspended in the quiet room like dust motes in the afternoon light. I wanted to believe her. God, some part of me still wanted that so badly. But I couldn't pretend anymore. "Love doesn't forge someone's name," I said, not raising my voice. "Love doesn't lie, or hide, or dump the weight on someone just because they never say no." I turned to Dylan. His expression didn't change. No guilt, just a flat look, like I was overreacting. "You always took care of stuff," he said, shrugging. "That's what you do." And there it was. The sentence that held my whole life in it. That's what you do. Something inside me settled then. Not in defeat, but in clarity. It was like standing still long enough to feel the ache in your legs after carrying something heavy for too long. "You're right," I said. "That is what I've done. I've bailed you out.
Covered for you.
Cleaned up behind you. I was the one who remembered the birthdays, the tax deadlines, the school forms. I stayed quiet because I thought if I kept everything in place, maybe it would mean something. Maybe it would mean I meant something." I saw Mom's hand move toward mine, and I took a small step back. Just enough. "I spent years trying to be the good daughter," I said, my voice tight. "Thinking it would protect me. Thinking if I kept everyone happy, I'd be safe. But I wasn't. I was just convenient." Dad looked down at the floor. Mom was blinking fast, dabbing at her dry eyes with the still clean tissue. Dylan tilted his head. "So what now? You gonna sue your own family?" I looked straight at him. He had our father's mouth, our mother's eyes, but none of their hesitation. He was made of confidence that wasn't earned and charm that never had to prove anything. "No," I said. "I'm going to protect myself from my family." I picked up the small cardboard box I'd asked them to gather for me. A few files, old medical records, some paperwork with my name on it that I didn't want in their hands anymore. It wasn't heavy. Not physically, at least. Nobody followed me to the door. Nobody said I'm sorry. Nobody asked me to stay. Outside, the air was brisk. Early spring, sharp enough to make my lungs sting. The wind caught my hair and pulled at the collar of my jacket as if asking, "Are you really doing this?"
Yes.
I was. Because now I saw it clearly. They hadn't just stumbled into hurting me. They'd made the choice, and worse, they'd made it with the certainty that I'd never leave. And I had played the part perfectly. Until now. Because I was done. Done playing the role they wrote for me before I ever had a say. Done earning love that came with strings. Done shrinking so they could stretch. I didn't look back. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed gavels or raised voices, no theatrical objections or gasps from the gallery. Just neutral carpet, wooden benches polished thin in the middle, and a quiet, steady rustle of paperwork and worn-out shoes on tile. It smelled like dust, copier toner, and something faintly metallic, like old radiator pipes and recycled air. Dana's contact, Eleanor Shaw, met me out front with a leather briefcase and a no-nonsense face. She was about my mother's age, but stood straighter than most people 10 years younger. Barely 5'2", but I'd bet money she could stare down a freight train without blinking. She wore sensible flats, a navy skirt, and a cardigan the color of oatmeal. But it was her voice that held me still, low, calm, direct. "We go in calm," she said, brushing a lock of graying hair behind one ear. "But we don't go in soft." I nodded. I didn't have anything left in me to soften anyway. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Across the aisle, the lender's legal rep looked like he had shaved that morning for the first time in his life. Too young, too smug, too rehearsed. He sat beside a woman who barely looked up from her laptop, typing so quickly her nails made a steady clatter, like rain on a tin roof. The judge entered quietly. She was gray-haired, sturdy, with an expression that didn't allow for nonsense. Her black robe looked too warm for the weather, but she didn't seem to notice. She adjusted her glasses, called the case number, and got straight to it. Eleanor didn't waste time. She laid out every document, pointed out every inconsistency, every instance where my name had been used on a loan I never consented to. She talked about undue influence, emotional coercion, breach of trust. She didn't embellish or dramatize. It was all in the paperwork. My family had left a breadcrumb trail of betrayal, and she followed it with sharp precision. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, hands cold but steady. I was raised to believe loyalty meant silence, I told the judge. That being a good daughter meant absorbing damage without flinching. I didn't question it. I thought love meant proving you could take it. My voice wavered just a little. Not from fear, but from the effort of staying centered. I signed the first form because I trusted them. I believed that was what you did when you loved someone. But what they asked me for, what they did with my name, it wasn't love. It was theft, dressed up in familiarity. The judge watched me closely, nodding once, then took a few notes without saying much. She didn't offer sympathy, but something about her stillness made me feel like I'd been heard. When it was over, I walked out of the courtroom and into the early spring sunlight. The kind that feels warm on your face but still bites your hands. I stood on the courthouse steps and just breathed. Not crushed. Not triumphant. Just still. Dylan hadn't come. Neither had my parents. No last-minute hugs. No teary explanations or pleas. They hadn't even bothered to show up and pretend. Their absence spoke louder than any excuse ever could. I didn't check my phone until Dana and I were halfway back to the office. One voicemail, from Mom. I recognized the tone before she even said a word. Soft, careful. The voice she used when she wanted to sound hurt without taking any responsibility. "I just hope you can forgive us. Families make mistakes. I know we handled it wrong, but we didn't mean..." I hit delete. The judge's ruling didn't erase the debt entirely. It wasn't a miracle, but it was just. The largest loans, the ones that had been modified or forged without valid signatures, were tossed. What remained was reduced significantly, manageable, and more importantly, acknowledged for what it was. The court issued a formal order. Dylan and my parents were prohibited from entering into any future financial agreements in my name. No loopholes. No family favors disguised as paperwork. It wasn't a clean slate, but it was mine. That night, I didn't go out, didn't call anyone. I went home, changed into sweatpants, and stood in my kitchen for a long time just staring at the candle on the windowsill. I lit it, not for celebration, not even for relief.
Just to mark something.
The end of the role I'd been forced to play for most of my life. The apartment was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. It felt honest. I sat at the table, folded my hands in front of me, and whispered the words I didn't even realize I needed to say out loud. I'm not yours anymore. And I'm not ashamed of that. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't have a plan. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval to start finding out. It's been just over 3 months since the hearing. My life didn't flip upside down afterward, not in the way people expect when they hear the word court. There was no dramatic celebration, no grand closure.
Just small shifts.
Quieter mornings. A different kind of silence. I still live at Silver Hill Apartments. The walls are the same pale eggshell color, and the pipes still make that odd clicking noise when the heat kicks on, but the space feels different now. There's a little fern on the windowsill that I bought with no particular plan, just saw it at the grocery store and thought, maybe something should grow here.
And it has. Slowly. Steadily.
The bookshelf that used to hold dusty tax binders and old family photo albums now has a row of novels I picked out for no reason, except I liked their covers. A few candles. A framed picture of me and Dana from her birthday last month, her wearing a ridiculous paper crown and me actually laughing, eyes crinkled in a way I hadn't seen in years. At work, I've moved to a different department. Less client stress. More internal audits and financial compliance stuff. Quiet, steady, just how I like it. Dana made the shift happen, though she never said it outright. That's the thing with her. She helps in ways that don't call attention to the helping. I muted the family group thread the day after the judgment came through. Not out of spite. Just clarity. The silence doesn't scare me like it used to. In fact, it's a kind of peace I didn't know I needed. No more walking on eggshells. No more deciphering guilt from under polite phrases. Every Thursday night, I have dinner at Dana's house. Sometimes it's just the two of us and her pot roast that she claims is nothing fancy. Sometimes her sons stop by, grown now, with kids of their own, and we eat on mismatched plates and talk about normal things. Car troubles, good books, what show we're watching this week. Last week, I was walking through the park on my lunch break when I saw a woman, probably in her 70s, trying to get into the passenger seat of a sedan while her daughter gently steadied her from behind. The daughter smiled, patient and soft. I felt something tight press into my chest. For a moment, grief curled its fingers around my ribs.
But it passed.
Grief doesn't always mean something's wrong. Sometimes it just means you let something go that you never really had. I wrote a letter to my mom last weekend. Not to send, just to say what I needed to. It wasn't angry. It was just true. You didn't lose a daughter. You lost a version of her who never said no. I hope one day you understand why that's not the same thing. The letter sits in the back of my journal. I don't read it often. I don't have to. Last night, at Dana's, we were clearing the table when her youngest son hugged me goodbye. Glad you're here, he said. Feels better when you're around. I smiled without thinking. Not the kind I grew up perfecting, the tight, polite one. This one felt real, like something rising up instead of being pushed out. As I turned to put the plates in the sink, something hit me. Not hard, not jarring, just gently enough to stop me mid-step. This is the first time I've ever felt chosen, not needed. There's a difference. Later that evening, I sat on Dana's porch with a throw blanket around my shoulders. The sky was painted in soft pinks and blues, the kind of colors that only show up when you're not trying too hard to catch them. I pulled out my journal, something I started bringing everywhere since therapy began. Not to chronicle, really just to stay grounded. I wrote slowly, letting the pen move without pressure. The final line came easier than I expected. I was born into a family that mistook sacrifice for love. But I'll die knowing love doesn't ask you to disappear. It sees you, holds space for you. I'm not angry anymore. I'm free. Maybe you've lived through something like this. Maybe you've been the one who kept the peace, even when it cost you pieces of yourself. And maybe, like Maren, you've finally reached the point where silence just doesn't feel like love anymore. It's not easy, choosing yourself after a lifetime of being the one who held it all together. But sometimes freedom doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in quiet decisions, in saying no without guilt, in finding people who make you feel seen instead of used. I truly believe that no matter how late it feels, we all deserve a place where we're valued just for being, not for what we can give, or fix, or carry. If this story touched something in you, I hope you'll stay with me for the ones still waiting to be told.